scripture this morning is from 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 1 through 9. And I am reading this from the Common English Bible, which may be just a touch different than the Pew Bibles. But I invite you to follow along there anyway. It is found on page 167 in the New Testament. 1 Corinthians 3, Paul is talking to the church at Corinth, which is troubled, which has had difficulty in coming together and understanding the gospel message. And Paul says these words: "Brothers and sisters, I couldn't talk to you like spiritual people, but like unspiritual people, like babies in Christ. I gave you milk to drink instead of solid food because you weren't up to it yet. Now you are still not up to it because you are still unspiritual. When jealousy and fighting exist between you, aren't you unspiritual and living by human standards? When someone says, 'I belong to Paul,' and someone else says, 'I belong to Apollos,' aren't you acting like people without the Spirit? After all, what is Apollos? What is Paul? They are servants who helped you to believe. Each one had a role given to them by the Lord. I planted, Apollos watered, but God made it grow. Because of this, neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but the only one who is anything is God who makes it grow. The one who plants and the one who waters works together, but each one will receive their own reward for their own labor. For we are God's co-workers, and you are God's field, God's building." May God help us to understand these words and decipher them today. You know, there's an old gospel song. It's in our hymnal. It's called, "I Love to Tell the Story." I love to tell the story, that old story of Jesus and his love. We've sung it periodically. It is wonderful, and the message is fabulous. In a similar way, I love to tell the story of the chaplaincy program that I get to be a part of every summer. When Ken asked me to come and tell you about what we do during the summer, I jumped on that opportunity because I love to tell and let people know what we are doing. You know, chaplaincy is an interesting thing. Chaplaincy is something that is a little bit different than ministry in a congregation. And we don't often hear about that. We have lots of people that have been involved in chaplaincy in this church. Joe Henry, whom we will celebrate a little bit later in this service. Orrin Newberry and Barbara Bullock, chaplains at the hospital. Each chaplaincy ministry is a little bit different. And the one that I participate in at Philmont Scout Ranch is different than any of those. And yet it has some things in common. One of the common things about chaplaincy is that our ministry with individuals is typically short-term. We get to see people once or twice, but not long-term like you do, say, at University Baptist Church, where sometimes we see people grow up for 20 or 30 or 50 years. We don't experience that in chaplaincy. And yet it is critically important, and it fits with what Paul was saying to the Corinthians about planting seeds and watering seeds, but unfortunately not getting the harvest at the end. So I come today to tell you a little bit about what it is that we do during the summer. For the last several years, this church has blessed Mary Ann and I in May or early June and sent us off to work in this chaplaincy program. And I think it's part of our responsibility then to let you know what it is we do and how we represent University Baptist Church and represent the Lord there. So let me tell you just a little bit about Philmont to start with. Philmont is the national high adventure base of the Boy Scouts of America. It is the largest youth camp in the world. It comprises some 170,000 acres in New Mexico, mostly mountains, and we use an additional 300,000 acres of surrounding land. Part of it is private land, part of it is U.S. Forest Service, and so on. But we're using somewhere close to 500,000 acres of mostly rugged mountain terrain. It is something else. It is the southern edge of the Rocky Mountains, an area known as the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, which, if you don't know your Spanish, and hopefully you do because you just listened to some in that beautiful song, but it means blood of Christ. And it is a name that was given to those mountains many, many years ago by the early settlers. And I think it's very applicable because we lovingly refer to Philmont and the surrounding area as God's country. And everything that is there centers on that concept. During the course of a summer, we have roughly 25,000 people come through and camp and hike at Philmont. It is massive. At any given time, if you were to walk in there, you might see 1,000 people. The rest are scattered about in that 500,000 acres, enjoying it, doing backpacking, doing a lot of different programs in that area. What we call the base camp, the area where people arrive and where the administrative functions are, is at about 7,000 feet elevation. Compare that to Denver, the Mile High City. It is 50% higher than that. And the mountains go up from there. That's the lowest point. And the mountains go up to almost 14,000 feet that we are hiking and ministering in. Every day throughout the summer for 13 weeks, somewhere between 300 and 350 people arrive to begin their experience there, and likewise about 350 leave and go home. They are there for 11 days, and of those 11 days, 10 of them are out there somewhere in the mountains doing their experiences. Almost all, because in the United States, 98% of the population come from zero elevation. Right? Almost all of us. Here in Columbus, we are at zero, essentially. We are flatlanders, and we take people and we move them out and immediately plunk them down at 7,000 feet, and that in itself is a problem that we have to deal with in ministry, because it makes it very difficult to breathe, it makes it difficult to acclimate, and then we're sending them up from there and expecting everybody to be in good health. Fortunately, we do a lot of health screening ahead of time, especially with adults, and try and make sure that they are in good shape. The average scout that comes there hikes between 60 and 120 miles during those 10 days, all in rugged terrain. It is a wonder that 15 and 16-year-olds can make that kind of a trek. It is absolutely amazing that adults can do that. And actually, that's where most of our problems come in, is with the adults. So the chaplaincy program there, we have a group of chaplains that support all 25,000 and all of the activities there. We have, at any given time, we have 3 Protestant chaplains, 3 Catholic priests, and a Jewish rabbi or cantor. And we work together as a team. We have obviously our individual pieces as Catholics and Protestants and so on, but we also work as a team to support the entire ranch and all of the things that are going on there. So for instance, on a typical weekly basis, we rotate through a variety of ministry areas that we all support. One of those is the medical ministry. We have a clinic there that has, at any given time, 3 doctors, 3 nurses, a variety of paramedics, and half a dozen medical students. It is a state accredited, thank you, I was looking for the right word, state accredited clinic slash hospital. We have inpatients, we have outpatients, and whoever is assigned to that ministry on a daily basis, it's like being a hospital chaplain. We are there for rounds in the morning. We see every inpatient, every outpatient. We work with them throughout the day. We see all the new ones coming in. Many of the problems that people have are both medical and non-medical. Because when we take people and we put them at high elevation, we begin to see problems with homesickness. We begin to see problems with altitude sickness. We begin to see conflict. And we spend a lot of our time dealing with conflict management. People that get along just fine at zero, at sea level, have a hard time getting along at high elevation. It's a well-known fact, and it's been studied in medical circles. And part of that, we discover, comes from the fact that as we get older, our bodies don't acclimate as well. And when you take a 50 or 60-year-old adult that's hiking with these kids, and their bodies say, wait a minute, stupid, what are you doing? And begin to show the signs of stress and difficulties in doing things, but we don't want to admit that to the kids, that we're having a problem. So instead we internalize that, and as we internalize it, we begin to get angry. And then we begin to lash out at the kids, and we have conflict going on. And so part of what we do as chaplains is deal with a lot of conflict management, helping them through that, helping them to find ways of expressing that and moving on and having a good time while they are there. One of our rotations is with logistics. Logistics is the nerve center, the brain of the entire operation. Logistics knows where all bodies are at all times, spread throughout that 500,000 acres. We can pinpoint anybody at any time and know at least where they should be at any time. And so when a message comes in and somebody calls in and says, I need Johnny to know that Grandpa just died, and help Johnny make a decision whether to stay there or to come home. It's the chaplain on duty that takes that message, drives 2 or 3 hours out to find Johnny, because we know where he's supposed to be, find them, work with the group out there, and with the adult advisors, decide what is going to happen. In many cases, it means driving another hour somewhere just to find a cell phone signal in the backcountry up in these mountains, so that Johnny can call home and talk to mom or dad and find out whether they should come home or whether they should stay. A very important part of that ministry. Another rotation is what we call backcountry. That is everything other than the flat space where we check in. All of that mountainous area where they are hiking. And we go back there to do a variety of things. Number one is to check on people, to make sure that our staff that are serving back there, that may not see the light of day for a month at a time, get a presence and check in with them and see how they're doing, take the pulse, see what they need, and make sure that they are happy and content and have all the resources that are there. While we are doing that, we also deliver supplies and take mail and staff that have come in for a day off and take them back out and so on. And then in return, we also pick up people that are coming. So we always have a full vehicle going one way or the other. We have four-wheel drive Suburbans. That is the only way to get there. Most of these roads were built to be 5 miles an hour and climbing over rocks, trying to get up and down the mountains. The trails are in good shape, but the roads are terrible. And trying to get somewhere takes forever. But we do that to check on them. And then when it rains, we have the wonderful experience of what we call peanut butter roads. The particular geology there turns all of the roads, all of the trails into peanut butter. And if you can picture that in your mind, trying to drive in peanut butter doesn't get you very far very quickly. In fact, it's downright dangerous and difficult when you have a 1,000-foot drop-off on the side of the road, and the road is only 6 inches wider than the tire base on the vehicle. So it's a fun, and there's a whole lot of prayers that go on during that time when we're driving around. There are other areas that we minister in as well, but that is just some examples of those. In other words, we stay busy about 16 hours a day, every day of the week, doing ministry, and yet it is exciting and fun. And believe it or not, in spite of all of that, my blood pressure drops immediately when I get the film on and stays low until the day I have to come back to Columbus, and then it goes back up again. The most important part, however, with all of that going on, we insist that the most important part of our chaplaincy is evening services, is preaching. We have, as I said, 3 Protestant chaplains, 3 Catholic, 1 Jewish. Every evening, the entire summer, 7 days a week, we have services at 7 o'clock. Those 7 o'clock services are the one place where we get to interact with virtually everybody coming and going from that camp. Everything else shuts down from 7 to 8 o'clock. There is no program, there is nothing going on. Everybody is encouraged, strongly encouraged, to go to services in the evening. The Protestant chapel is just amazing. I would love to have a big picture here to show you of it. It is an open-air chapel. It seats 250. It is wooden benches. We're hoping to get those updated to some metal ones, but in the meantime, and in the front, there is a 30-foot wooden cross. And as you sit there and you look toward the cross, look toward the front of it, you look out on a field which is full of deer with their babies, birds flying around, horses walking by, every once in a while a black bear coming down through, all kinds of wonderful experiences of God's creatures. What better place to worship God than right there in that open chapel? And right next to it, just 20 or 30 yards away, is the edge of the mountains. And it goes up right from there. So as you're sitting there looking at it, you see the mountains, you see where you are headed tomorrow, early in the morning. During our chapel services, we pretty much do what we do here at UBC. That is, we have songs, a variety of songs. They're a little bit limited in scope because we have found songs that all of us agree upon. I may be serving this summer. I was serving, for instance, with an Episcopalian and a Lutheran. Put that together with Baptists and trying to find things that we have in common. It's not easy, but we have done that. Last year, I had a Presbyterian and a Methodist that I was serving with. So we have come together over the years and put together a group of songs that we kind of all agree upon, and that young people and old people can sing together. We have readings from the Psalms. One of our favorites is Psalm 121, which we read or sung just a little while ago. Where does my help come from? I look to the mountains. I look to the hills. God is ever present. And these youth are going from our service in the evening to heading up in the mountains the next day, and we want to impress upon them that God is there with them all the time as they are walking along. So Psalms, and we do those as responsive readings. We have prayers. We have an offering, believe it or not, to support our ministry program and so on. 80% of those that we are preaching to are between the ages of 14 and 18. So the kind of sermons that we put together and the way in which we try and preach the gospel message is a little bit different than it might be here at UBC, where the congregation is, shall I say, just a little bit older on average. One of the things that I try and do, for instance, is to use interactive preaching and things that will grab these kids where they are. So one of the sermons, for instance, I passed out pine cones to every single person who was there. Actually, Douglas Fir is a very specific one. Passed out 250 of these pine cones because in that there is a story of God and His love that sometime I'll tell you. But it is a wonderful story, and they see these Douglas fir trees and other kinds of pine cones, and they carry these with them. I've had kids that have carried these with them for 11 days and come back and shown me their crushed, mangled little cone, but they carried it with them to remind them of the story of God being with them the whole time. Another one that I put together a few years ago, I was thinking about as we were driving to Philmont, in fact, those yellow diamonds that you see in cars that say baby on board. And I started thinking about those, and I said, okay, what happens if we have ones that say God on board? And what would that mean if we had those in our cars? What would that mean if we had those on our backpacks as we're hiking and so on? And so Marianne and I got together, and we made 300 of an appropriate size to hang on backpacks. And we handed them out during the sermon, and kids took them, and they were excited, and they put them on their backpacks, and they went back into the backcountry to hike with these on, and they came back and they said, wow, everybody was asking me about it. And I got to tell them about God and about how much God loves me and God is with me. And pretty soon other staff were coming up and saying, can we get some of these? And we had to go and make 300 more. And handing them out. And it's been a wonderful experience. And so those kinds of things that excite kids where they are. And messages about hiking and camping, and messages about God and the Holy Spirit being with them as they are doing these tough things. Because it is tough. They are going on a 10-day trek that is harder than any of us can imagine it will be until we go and do it. And then we come back and we say, yes, I was nuts. Why did I do this? It is incredibly difficult. So we have an awesome responsibility. It is a wonderful delight to be able to preach to them. It is also a responsibility because we have one shot to plant a seed or to water the seeds that are already there. We get a few that when they come back off of their trek, their last night before they go home, they come back and they go to service again. But it's only maybe 15 or 20% that do that. The rest of them are so excited about being back and taking a shower and getting a meal that they didn't have to cook and things like that, that they don't bother to come to service. But it is, so for the most part, we have one shot to impact them. You may wonder what Mary Ann's role is in all of this. While I'm preaching and running around doing things, and Mary Ann has a wonderful role as what I would call the glue of our chaplaincy program. She is, for our Protestant chapel, the chief usher and greeter every single night. She talks to everybody coming to service, 200 of them every night, and talks to them about how their day is going, what they're looking forward to, where they have been, smiling at them, encouraging them, and encouraging each one of them to do the Duty to God program that we have set up, where they actually earn a patch, and of course Scouts love patches. It is a wonderful program, but it encourages them every single day to relate to God, to read meditations that we have set up for them and that we give to them, and so on. And then at the end of the service, we also are able to give every one of them a Philmont New Testament and Psalms. And we give out about 12 to 14,000 of these every summer, free of charge. They are paid for by, and it's interesting, groups that can never get together and agree on anything else in life. The Baptists and the Presbyterians and the Methodists and the Catholics all coming together to print these Bibles and hand them out. And it is wonderful, wonderful to have that opportunity. Most of them then carry these into the backcountry with them. They read them as they are directed, as we give them meditations and scriptures during the course of their week. And they come back, and we actually tell them, if you come back and your Bible is clean, there's a problem. Your Bible ought to be dirty and have the smells of the hillside in it when you come back, and then take that home with you and remember this wonderful, close encounter with God that you had. In any pastoral ministry of any kind, there's a downside. We know that well, right? There are always negatives, always things that are happening, whether it's in chaplaincy or in a church congregation. And of course there, we also have our downside. I wouldn't want to pretend that we don't. Even with the incredible health screening that we go through, we have adults that have problems. And at least every other year, we have the experience of someone dying out in the backcountry. It's unfortunate, it's hidden disease, usually heart condition, that has not been diagnosed or picked up. This summer was no different. I was on day off and actually got away. We were going to Santa Fe, I think, and got called back immediately to deal with the death or the potential death. At that particular time, they were still doing CPR 10 miles out into the backcountry, but being the lead Protestant chaplain, I needed to be there and work with the family and talk with them. Unfortunately, his son was with him on the trek, 52 years old, and suddenly just dropped over. Those are the downsides of ministry. Those are things that we have to deal with. And it gets into whole different areas and aspects necessarily trained for, but we learn quickly along the way. Those who are in hospital chaplaincy, of course, deal with that on a regular basis. Many of the rest of us do not. But those types of difficulties are overshadowed by the positives. There are so many wonderful positives. I said my blood pressure drops dramatically when I get there. That's a positive, certainly, while we're there. One of the positives that I think of all the time is the kids and the adults who come back to service on their last night because they had such a good experience the first time, and they come back and they say, we loved the service, we loved your preaching, thank you for that, and they come back a second time. Or when we're driving around in the back country and they stop us and they say, Pastor Kerry, good to see you back here. It was so wonderful to go to your service. And they begin to talk about what they're doing, or they show me and they say, look, I've got the duty to God thing on my, or God on board on my backpack, and it's been so exciting. And they stop us. That kind of wonderful ministry is worth all of the downsides alone. The teamwork is amazing. And I know in many other chaplaincies, like hospital and so on, we see this as well. But the opportunity to work side by side with Catholic priests and a Jewish cantor, and we are all one. And our purpose is the same. And even just to work with an Episcopal and a Lutheran and a Methodist and work together as a team and never, ever, ever worry about the differences or the conflicts between us is so amazing. It is a model that I wish more of us could pick up in ministry. I wish it was a model that denominations could grapple with and say, you know what, there's no reason why we should be separated. There's no reason why we shouldn't be working together for the cause of Christ. It is one and the same, and it is so, so blessed to be a part of that. The personal interactions are amazing. I was thinking yesterday, as I was jotting this down, of a father and son that I had about 4 years ago. And they came up after service one night, and they said, I'm not quite sure how to say this, but that was really a blessing to hear your preaching, to have this service. And I said, well, thank you. You know, that's nice. And they said, now, let me explain this to you. We came here to Philmont with the expectation that because this was not a Baptist service, it was a Protestant service, that it was going to be watered down, that there would be no gospel, there would be no preaching about Jesus, and we came with a bad attitude. And then you got up there and you preached the gospel. And we were blown away. And you made our day. And you made the difference in whether we headed out into the backcountry with a negative attitude or with a positive attitude. And they were so overjoyed. And they came back after their 10 days out in the mountains, and they came back and they said, wow, your service made the difference in our experience. Not just for us, but for our entire crew of 12. Thank you so much. Those are the kinds of interactions that are so amazing. A couple of years ago, I was at a medical conference down at Ohio University. And all of a sudden, across the way, I hear somebody call out and say, Pastor Kerry! And I'm like, really? What? Nobody calls me that except at Philmont. Mm-hmm. And I turned around, and it was a Philmont staff member who was going to OU, and he saw me and he recognized me, and he didn't know that I also teach medicine, and that's why I was there. And he said, wow! You know, it was somebody that I was very close to during the summer and had a lot of time to interact with one-on-one, and it carried over and made a difference months later here in Columbus. Ministry has its downside, as we all know, but the positives make the difference. At the end of the day, at the end of the camping season, we hope that we have planted some seeds. We hope that we have watered the seeds that have been planted back home. And we hope that for the sake of the gospel, we've made the difference in the lives of at least a few. Like most chaplains, we never get to see the harvest, or rarely get to see the harvest. We don't get to baptize. We don't get to see people come to that saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. But we know that it goes on. And we can thank God that it goes on. even if we're not there to see it. As we continue to do this ministry year after year, I pray that the Lord will continue to bless us, that we might go forth and make the difference in the lives of others. And I thank God for University Baptist Church and for your support and encouragement as we go and do this ministry of planting seeds, planting the gospel message, and watering those seeds that are out there each and every year. Thank you for your blessing and your support. Amen.
Amen.